Okay, Hillary, it's all yours.
Great. Well, good afternoon, PRSA Inland Empire members and friends. Thank you for joining today's webinar about this year's Polaris Awards. My name is Hillary Angel. I am the Polaris Award Chair and past chapter president. I'm also happy to introduce you to Aaron Norris. He is with the Norris Group and currently the chapter president, and Carrie Gilbreth with Westbound Communications, who is also on the webinar. Today we'll discuss what's new in 2014 for the Polaris Awards, which includes new entry guidelines, new entry fees that are lower, and the overall benefits of entering the Polaris Awards. Also, Carrie will share tips on creating an entry. She has won multiple Polaris Awards, Best of Show, and is also a National PRSA Silver Anvil Award winner, and she'll go through her case study and entry as well. So what exactly are the Polaris Awards? The PRSA Inland Empire chapter hosts this annual award program to recognize the best of the best in public relations. We recognize complete programs that incorporate the four-step process of research, planning, execution, and evaluation. The Polaris Awards represent the highest standard of performance in the public relations profession in Riverside and San Bernardino counties. And this competition is open to all communication professionals, public relations, and marketing and in the Inland Empire, as I mentioned, or has a client in the Inland Empire. So this year, what's new is we have a fancy new award. We're very excited. And we've decided to change it up. The Polaris Awards have been going on for over 20-plus years. And we've decided to bring back the focus to the actual Polaris Award. The Polaris Award recognizes complete public relation programs. There are 3 different award levels, but there's 2 awards that will be presented. Best of Show. There's usually 1 entry that receives the Best of Show. From the winning entries, the judges from our sister chapter will select an award for the Best of Show honor based on a point system. If an entry does not meet the point criteria, a Best of Show may not be given. So basically, best of members of our PRSA sister chapter who will be judging it, entries can earn up to 100 points. And so they select one of those entries possibly for the Best of Show. The Polaris is an entry that receives a score of 90 points or more. And now in the past, we had a Capella Award that was presented to those entries who received points between 75 and 89. This year, entries who are within this point system will receive a Capella Certificate of Excellence certificate, and will have the option to order an actual trophy. So now I will turn this over to Aaron to discuss why these changes for the new award.
Yeah, we're really excited about sort of revamping Polaris. I don't even know the last time we did, but we did a pretty extensive survey back in December before the year started, and we asked what was important, and price was really, I guess, getting a little bit high. It had actually quadrupled in, I think, about 4 years, and part of that is because of oil prices, and a lot of the awards are Lucite. So we were just getting some feedback of it was just getting a little too costly for entry and then also to attend the awards. So we did everything we could to revamp and make it more reasonable, because the more awards, the more recognition, the better it is for our community at large. And that's what we want. So there you go.
And you guys will love the new award, because I know most of you who are on the call may have entered the Polaris Awards or do have won other awards from other competitions. And so this is just another one to put into your lobby or on your desk, or just to bring around or take a photo to put in your community newsletter or whatever. So we're really happy about this new award. So going through the categories, there are 23 categories for you to enter. And I'm sure many of you have worked on many projects throughout the year. So kind of reflect back and see what you've worked on. And so just kind of give you some ideas to think, what have I been doing for this last year? What's something that I can be proud of that has been part of the 4-step public relations process? Were you recently involved with a special event? Was it a one-time special event program that was designed to generate awareness within key audiences? For example, did you do a product launch, a grand opening, special anniversary, or any other observance? Are you responsible for an internal or external newsletter, whether it's digital or print? Does your department produce a magazine or publication? Or did you recently complete a public relations campaign or public affairs campaign? Or with social media, did you just implement a new social media strategy, a whole new blog series, or maybe a new website. So take a look at these categories. There's several different ones to choose from. I highly recommend when you're putting together these entries, you kind of reflect back, look at it and go, wow, this kicked butt. And it's a good way for you to use for your clients as a case study, also for your resume for a builder, and to show this is the program I put together.
And student awards, we haven't, we're really hoping to see a lot more of this, and actually I'm working on one for Give Big Riverside County. We're going countywide, and Marianne Pearson and I are working with a bunch of students, I think up to 7, who are helping us get the word out, and we've decided to turn it into a Polaris project. So we've gone through the RPEE process, RP, whatever you want to call it, which we'll get to later. But as far as student projects go, undergraduates can apply. Projects from public relation courses are okay as long as it includes a fully developed public relations program. So we really want to see the research planning evaluation, the execution, and the evaluation we know is a little bit more difficult, so that's where the student awards are a little bit more lenient, and we're going to judge those locally. All right. Am I still up for
Yes, you are.
eligibility? All right. So we're looking for projects that occurred between June 1st of 2013 and June 1st of 2014. The projects need to follow the criteria that the company or client needs to have resided in the Inland Empire, except for students, of course, and then the project was executed in the Inland Empire. So we're all very Inland Empire focused, but if you're in LA and had a client in the Inland Empire, that works just great. And of course, this is open to both members and non-members of PRSA. We have a completely new digital application that we're really excited about. No more binders, less expensive. You don't have to show up at anybody's office at 5:05 and pray that they're open. And if you've never used Dropbox, it's a free tool up to 2 gigabytes. Depending on some of your projects, that might be a little bit of a challenge if you're uploading entire videos, but there's always ways around that, like utilizing YouTube. We're really trying to make this as efficient as possible for everyone. The process is super simple. We need you to get organized. You're going to upload your files to Dropbox. You're going to confirm at awards@prsaie.org, and then you're going to pay for it on the awards website. And I'm going to walk you through the process really fast because you being very organized is going to help us a great deal. So on our website, let me get there. On the PRSA website under Polaris Awards, it's a section option down under Events and Awards. You're going to land on this page. You'll see it on the quick links on the left-hand side, Pay for Entries, Download Polaris Entry Guide. If you open that, it's a PDF of pretty much everything that we're covering today with all the information. And what I'm going to show you right here is this. Let me see if I can zoom in really quick because this is really important. Dropbox is a free tool, as I said, up to 2 gigabytes. And there's 2 ways to do this. You can either create the folder, and I really need you to focus on naming everything correctly. So the category number is, let me scroll in.
Like those 23 categories we went through. So
exactly. So annual reports is 4. So that's the category number. Let me scroll back up to the page really quick. So the category number, entrant name, so it would be 4, and if it was me, the Norris Group, and then the project title. Why that's really important, and I'll show you what it's going to look like on my computer. I've created a folder on my computer called Norris Group _ Polaris, and I have 2 projects I'm currently working on. 4 is the Norris Group Give Big Riverside Annual Report. That's one we're working on with students, just to make it easy. And then here's all my files. This naming protocol is going to be very important for 3 different files. Number 1, the main folder. You're going to want a JPEG or a PowerPoint slide that we could easily end up incorporating into the award ceremony itself, and then the application itself. We need those 4 things named the exact same way, and they're different file types, so you shouldn't run into problems with that. And then everything else is going to be your backup. Name your backup materials easily and simply and reference them inside your document whenever possible to make it easier for the readers so they can find things that they need quickly. The other way to do that is you're going to organize it exactly the same, but if you don't I can go back to Dropbox on my main computer, and if I have Dropbox downloaded on my computer, it is a program that you need to download. I can share this folder, and it will open up in a web browser, and I would invite awards at prsaie.org. Or the other way to do it is to simply go to Dropbox itself, create a folder. In this case, I've already created the main folder because I was practicing this to make sure I didn't make a fool of myself today on the webinar. And I completely just uploaded the file. So up here on the top left, you're going to see Upload. Just going to click on that. You're going to want to choose the files. Oh boy, what a mess. And I'm not going to be able to find it easily. But you can see I've created the folders correctly. So here it is, _Norris Group _ Give Riverside Annual Report. And then here's all the backup stuff that I was supposed to do. What's great about that is when you do that, we get notified at awards@prsaie.org, and for the sake of the judges, we're able to easily pull 4 into a folder that says 4, and all the annual reports category will be updated with everybody's projects. It just helps us make it super easy and fast. So thank you so much. If you have questions, you can also always email awards@prsaie.org, but we also have it pretty extensively what you need to do inside the directions.
Well, thank you, Erin. No, I highly recommend for the being able, when you're filling out the entry form that you're able to download, there is an area where it's an application, the entry form, the summary, and then it talks about, and you can upload your supporting documents. It's very, very, very easy. You can go to Dropbox.com, create an account, and upload the files. And when you do email us, I will respond, or our committee members will respond. Got your files, great, thank you, just so you have some confirmation that you have uploaded them.
And because we're using Dropbox, you're going to want to email us and let us know it's complete, because if you're me and I'm already starting and you invited awards@prsaie.org, it keeps on updating on our profile. So we want you to say, hey, I'm all finished, go ahead and move the files. So that's important. Okay, required guidelines. Entries that do not meet these criteria will be disqualified. Complete entry forms. You got to have that, and they're just no excuse for not filling it out completely. And then judges are not going to assign categories for you. Remember, there's no board members. We're not judging these awards. They don't know you. They don't care. But if you're entering into an annual report category when it should be a website, you'll get disqualified, and that would be a horrible waste of money. So don't do that. One project, multiple entries. So if you have a really great project that you want to enter in multiple categories, feel free to do so. It is a separate application process, which now that we're not doing binders, how easy is that? You're literally being able to copy and paste at least all the backup material. You're just having to update the application itself.
The 2-page summary.
Exactly. Okay, guidelines some more. Submit each entry on Dropbox like we talked about. Prepare a concise summary, no longer than 2 typewritten pages to introduce your project. That's going to cover your introduction, the research, planning, execution, and evaluation. Font size can't be any smaller than 10-point font, and margins must be a minimum of 0.5 inches all around. Let's see, all entries that meet the Polaris Awards criteria will be recognized in a multimedia presentation. That's why it's really important that you end up giving us either a PowerPoint slide or a JPEG. If it's not there, we have to end up subtracting 10 points, and that you might have been best in show, and that would automatically possibly kick you even out of the running for a Polaris. So don't do that. Somebody's phone is vibrating.
I know, I hear it. Well,
sorry, that was me.
It's Carrie. Okay. So let's go on to the top 5 mistakes.
Okay. So basically, we kind of run view, but basically you need to provide backup material to your summary, into your entry. If you're talking about launching a new website you're responsible for and you do not have screenshots of the website pages, or if you have any Google Analytics or any type of supporting material to show the case of why it was a fantastic public relations campaign. So be sure to have backup material. Also look carefully at the category descriptions and choose the appropriate subcategory for each piece. And also, as part of the execution portion of your entry, please be sure to identify your budget. you need to make sure you incorporate the numbers. What was your budget? Was it $5,500? Was it $50,000? You make sure you please include the cost. Also, make sure it's in the right time frame. All entries and submissions must be executed between June 1st, 2013 and June 1st, 2014. And also, of course, it may seem like a no-brainer, but if you don't enter, you cannot win a Polaris Award.
Duh, that's what happened to me last year. With that, hopefully this will get really fun. We would definitely want to cover the RPI process. People say it different ways. Execution, what's the other word for execution? Where's the I come in if it's RPIE?
Implementation.
Implementation, thank you. Anyway, today we've got joining Carrie Gilbreth with Westbound Communications. I'm really grateful she's here to share with us some information about the I-215 groundbreaking project, which actually worked its way through several awards locally and then also went all the way to win the coveted Silver Anvil Award, which is huge. And so, Carrie, thank you for joining us today. Very grateful.
Well, thank you for having me today. I'm thrilled that we have such a good turnout today. And again, a huge thanks to Aaron and Hillary for actually putting this together. It's incredibly helpful. There's definitely a, I want to say process or a best practice process that we've learned over the years that you follow in terms of what's the best way to win an award and what are the trigger words that other chapters are looking for and what is it that we can do. And so that's, those are really where we started this. I've worked on awards now, and now I'll just really date myself, for the better part of 17 or 18 years now. And, for a good part of that, it was always local entries. But then moving into when we were working heavily on the consumer side with PR News and PR Week, and now that we work more on the government side, looking at things like Silver Anvil, CAPIO, and National Association of Government Communicators. And so really, and just following off of what the tips of what not to do, it's funny you put budget in there, and that's really one of the biggest things that will always get hit, and it's the biggest challenge for an agency. It's much easier because we have a budget, and we have clients. They're paying us so much to do a project, and so it's very easy to incorporate those budget numbers. But when you are when you work in-house for a school or for a government organization, it's very hard sometimes to put dollars toward that and how to measure those dollars. And so, one of the things to look at it is to look at what your out-of-pocket costs are. But then if you're internal too, sometimes what we've even done in the past is to get an equivalency rate on resources. So what is your time worth? What is IT's time worth if you're bringing in a big website component? What are the things that we can do from that front? If we want to go ahead and talk, I'm going to bounce just a little bit right before we go into the research. And one thing that I would say is really important before we jump into that is how you set up your award entry. One of the biggest challenges we have is that we ship these across the United States. So no one knows who we are. No one knows what projects we're working on. And when we think something has huge relevance, there's a big chance that other people don't. Because, and it's one of those things where we're just too close to it. So before I get into research, I want to give a couple good tips on the introduction. And to make sure, number one, that you always have an introduction. And even before that, make sure that you create what can be, what should be a flashy, catchy name to your award entry. I mean, think about when we go to Polaris and they announce the winners, and especially when you elevate it up to Silver Anvil, you want the name of it to catch. And that was something we didn't do for a lot of years. And then as we started studying a lot of the best practices, really was one of the key things we picked up. So really making sure you have a catchy, clever title, short title, is very helpful. The introduction sets up what situation you're in, because when you go straight to research, it's a hard deal, because when you go straight to research, you're saying what you did, but you're not really able to give a person who has no clue what you're talking about the insight as to what it is that you're trying to prove. So it's a quick overview of the situation, a quick overview of the problem that you're having, because again, an award-winning entry shows more so that you were able to create success through challenge than necessarily just create success. You know, it's always easy to be the straight A kid if you aren't around straight A students all the time. But if you're around straight A students, then you got to be the A+ kid. So how do we set ourselves up to do that? One thing we really like to do is to put our objectives actually in the introduction itself, and to make sure that those objectives are measurable. And when you talk about that, that's the only way that you can gauge yourself throughout the process to make sure. One of the big challenges, both with putting together a plan that becomes an award, a lot of us are in the situation where we have to just do it. Either our clients are asking us to just do the program, our bosses are, from an internal perspective we are. So there's not always the time or resources given to plan. If I can give one piece of advice, if you believe something is award entry worthy from the get-go, which now we actually run all of our projects based off of awards. If we were going to do an award entry, invest the personal time and resources to create the plan so that you can measure yourself. So do not allow, it's worth the 3 or 4 hours you're going to put into it and what it can return. Because again, then you're able to create the measurable objectives. You put the plan up front in terms of your backup materials, especially since we have very limited room now. It gives them a very good understanding beyond your 2-page, and then you're able to go from there. Then are we good to go ahead and go into research?
Yeah, and you know what? Let's go back and forth because this can get super dry. So I'll cover a lot of this information that I'll talk about is the really super boring stuff. So you can be really interesting and give us inside tips on the project that you did that ended up winning a silver amble. So that way we can break it up so everyone's not asleep by the end of our webinar.
Okay, that sounds wonderful.
Okay, well, I took a lot of this straight from the Silver Anvil Awards, what they're looking for and what they're recommending as part of the application for that. And so basically we're just a more local version of that. So every great project, got to do your research. What prompted the research? What type of research did you do? Were you using primary research, which involves original research, including focus groups, interviews, or surveys? And then, of course, you've got secondary research like data that you can collect from third-party sources, web-based searches, libraries, things like that. How was the research relevant to shaping the planning process? And I think really, really important is how did the research help define or redefine the audiences or the situation, which really helps get you into what Carrie was talking about as far as creating very strategic goals. So let's talk a little bit about your project, Carrie. How would what'd you do for research as far as Sandbag goes?
So let's talk about what we did with Sandbag. So this, what we ended up winning both Best in Show and the Silver Anvil for was the I-215 groundbreaking project. And that was, it was where all the stars aligned, and I do want to be cautious with that, is that, this is the only Silver Anvil we've won, mainly because of that, because you have to display that national significance. And what made this special was that it was a 4-part project, 4-phase project. The first 2 were paid for and done. All of a sudden there was no money for the 3rd and 4th. And had the stimulus not come in when Obama started the ARRA project, the freeway would have been halted. And so luckily we were able to come in on the research side of that and help justify the need for the project, and then became one of 10 $100 million plus stimulus projects in the country that were awarded the funding to move forward. So when we got to our research for this, for the groundbreaking event, we figured out we could be the first to go. So again, what we tried to do and what was so important was that when writing the introduction and research portion, it was setting ourselves up to show we were the only ones that had the ability to do this. And so what we raced to is once we were able to pull the facts of how depressed the area was, we were able to pull the facts of how you had the entire region join together, both Riverside and San Bernardino, to support this, how we were able to manage how the freeway was selected for funding. That all became key to how we did the research for how we would create the event. We also were able to research who were the biggest proponents of ARA. We were able to pull those politicians in and set that whole thing up. But in terms of research, think stats. Again, it's one of the things that a lot of our clients, bosses, all of the above don't want to put the time and money towards. So again, worth a little personal investment on your side in terms of what we were able to do. And it was through actually our research that we were able to determine we were the first ones to really go to groundbreaking on this. So all of a sudden, this continued to become a national story when you had national stats combine it. So that was a very good thing for us. And then making sure that the research supported our overall goals.
I wanted to also let everybody know who's listening, if you'd like to email in, not email, but message in with questions for Carrie as we go along, please feel free to do so. You've got probably, let's just say, half a page or less when you're doing this in a 2-page format, Carrie. Any tips on, I mean, you did a lot of research. How do you recommend, what do you put in it and what do you not put in the application?
Okay, so in terms of that, the best thing I would recommend with that is all of our award entries always go 3 to 4 pages when we do a first draft. And the best thing is I would honestly say we are all too close to the award entries we're writing. And so when we move to our editing process, we actually have our own colleagues edit our work that are not familiar with the project, because they're able to cut out the things that they view that would not be interesting. And so for us, what we may think it was interesting on this project, and we thought it, when we look at what was important from our end, we pulled, for example, too many stats on showing the depression of the Inland Empire. Well, that could have improved with 2 stats instead of 10 stats. And so think about what's enough just to be able to sell your point across. And again, the best thing I can say is find someone else. Either if your PR department is small or too small, then I would find someone in PRSA and start that editing process that way, because that's how we were able to really make it succinct enough to get to being that half page.
Right. Okay. Well, that's a good tip. I have a tendency to be a little wordy. All right. Planning phase.
As do I.
Planning phase. How do, of course, how does a plan correlate to the research that we've done on a project? What was the plan in general terms? What were the specific measurable objectives? Do you typically sort of reiterate those here in the planning phase, or do you just typically just leave them up in the introduction?
We leave them up in the introduction, but then when we move into planning, we talk about how we're working against those goals.
Got it.
So really, it's between taking it, just being a goal, and then you're actually putting it into action.
Got it.
So it's the steps you're taking toward making that work. The key to planning is to really identify what challenges you came across during that planning process. Again, they want to see your problem-solving skills as well as your success. And so for us, for the 215, what was the biggest challenge was that there was a challenge among the contractor. When the contractor was chosen, it was a huge project, so there was actually a challenge by the second place contractor. It prolonged the actual final selection. So it took us from a 2-month planning process to a 2-week planning process to be able to start to be able to have the actual event. And so for us, it was key. We had all the materials ready to go, everything ready to go. But think about when you're having an event with national significance that you're giving people in Washington a 2 weeks notice to try and be out there. Mm. And if you aren't doing that, then you're giving them a 2 weeks notice on how they're going to promote that within themselves. So talking about a planning time, national significance, less than 2 weeks in government, that obviously became a big challenge, so we were able to really rely on the work we had done to press that before. Then with that, we complemented the actual invitee work with the media relations. And again, the research came in so handy when we went to the media relations side, because that's what allowed us to have our selling point to create the story for the Wall Street Journal and the AP.
Wow, sounds like you had several audiences, which is not unusual, but a lot of big, important audiences, and it sounds like you were able to really help with developing the strategy at higher levels. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah. It really was. It was, the one thing we always have to remember now, and I'm sorry, Aaron, just for 2 seconds, our jobs are no longer about just media relations or just event planning. Everything now crosses such a spectrum as to a full comprehensive communications plan as to what we put forward. And, it's something that we're all challenged with on a regular basis. And, I've got to give props out to one that's being used right now. And I saw she was attending. I hope she's on CL Lopez with the county of San Bernardino. You watch something now that go out where they had a hoarded dog situation, had 38 animals brought in last week, and by Sunday they had all animals adopted out because of a combination of traditional media relations, social media, in-house video, marketing. It was really fantastic in terms of what we all do now in terms of how we define public relations.
Agreed. Well, I think planning, there wasn't really that much else to cover. We're, of course, going to talk about the target audiences, the strategy you're using, and then, of course, revisiting the budget piece. Is there anything else about the project in particular you wanted to bring up in the planning phase, or shall we move on?
Yeah, I think we're going to move on. I mean, the other parts of the planning, other than talking about going against the budget, identifying the challenges, is to really, in the planning, identify how you made that project unique. So for us, it was important for us to make our project the showcase for all of the ARA projects to come. And so we didn't even think we weren't challenged with that, but in terms of an award entry, it was very important to show the national significance. And whether it's regional, national, industry, whatever that is, talk about what your goal is, what the point is to create that significance across the board.
Great. Okay. Next up is execution. In this part of the application, how was the plan executed and what was the outcome? How did the activities flow in general terms? What were the tactics you used to achieve your goals? Were there any difficulties encountered along the way, and how did you handle them? What were some of the other partners and organizations involved in the process? And were non-traditional public relations tactics used, such as advertising, which you just covered? You just played right into that. You're right.
Look at that.
So I found this picture while I was putting the slideshow together. I mean, barber boxer down at groundbreaking. So I was fascinated with how many different levels and probably audiences you were having to coordinate with and juggle with. It had to have been a lot of fun.
It was, it was a big challenge, but it was fantastic. And I just have to share one funny side. When we had Victor Mendez out, who was head of the Transit Authority back in Washington. I have to laugh. He was originally from Arizona, and he had to make sure he left in time so he could get in and out on his way back to the airport.
Priorities.
There's priorities in California.
Funny.
Sorry, that was just one of the fun sidelines. But in terms of execution, keep in mind this was the place where we could be visual with our words. We're very strategic in our words with the research and the planning. The execution is where those words become visual and they come to life. And so that was really important to us as to how we were able to sell this, especially for a government groundbreaking, because government groundbreakings, by history, can be somewhat stereotypical. There isn't something that's always something unique. We were able to be really fortunate with it in that we held it because we are the home of the historic Route 66. We actually themed transportation through the years, and we were able to bring in classic Fords. And we had to do Fords because we actually held the event at the Ford dealership where you could oversee the freeway. So it was really perfect in terms of that. And also leveraging that dealership was the most impacted of all our businesses too, so it was good in the community partnership. But again, this is something where it was really critical that someone that is not close to it reviews it. We had way too much in this section. We were listing people that they would have cared less about. We thought it was very important to list everyone under the sun that we secured, that was speaking, that was there. And again, that didn't make a big difference in this. And so then really going back and then owning that down and starting that down and just creating the visuals. So what was the setup? Who were the people? What were the media that were attending there? Again, building that bigger significance. And then for us, it was important to show that we were getting people to work, because with the ARA, we were proving that thousands were going to be employed by this in the most depressed region at that point, second to Detroit. And so we actually, our photo op was not of the ribbon, but it was actually of getting people to work. So we actually staged an area where they could go look over, and we had the bulldozers ready, and we started clearing things with all of our guys, many of which we brought back that had been unemployed, were there working, and we made them fully available to the media too. And, you know, not only was that great for the event, but it was so personally inspiring to see people that had been out of work for 2 years to be coming back.
How did you capture that as part of the application? So we've covered research, planning, and execution so far. What were some of the most important? I mean, research seems pretty easy, and that's pretty easy because it's Excel, it's PDFs, it's all that. Planning, I can imagine timelines and budgets and whatnot. But when it comes to the execution, what do you recommend that we include as part of our backup?
Yeah, you know what's interesting? It's one of the hardest things to be able to include, because it's one of those things where if you've done all the planning, then the execution becomes light, because you question what goes in the execution and what goes in the evaluation.
Right.
So again, what we did for a lot of our execution, that's where a lot of our visuals came in. So it was a lot of photography, because our site maps, our day of event planning, all of that went into the planning itself. So again, for the execution, we focused a lot on visuals. We focused a lot on attendance sheets. We were able to get we incorporated some of the media results into execution because it was actual media attending. So we built that into it too. But I will say it was our most visual section, but it was also it was our thinnest section.
Yeah, and I'm in my brain, I'm also thinking with us going digital for the first time, we really have to think about the end user. Just make sure you're really organized and you're referencing sort of a folder where they can easily find all the pictures and name them well. And it's just a little bit different. So before we could do the binders, and it's pretty basic and easy, but this time we really have to strategically think how we're getting organized in a file so the person on the other end isn't angry with us by the time they're done.
Well, and you know, Aaron, there's a big point to that. And, you know, the other part was switching from binders to digital backups. You know, we used to be able to, with creating the dividers for binders, you know, we could use photos with that. We could keep telling our story. And now we have to be very careful with that. So what are the most effective ways to tell it in a very finite period? So again, just like we have people review our award entry, I would actually now, which we'll do for this, have outsiders review what we are going to submit as backup so that we make sure that it makes sense.
That's a really good point. I like that idea. Well, finally, we're down to evaluation. So the final, and I think one of the most important pieces is you've done all your research or planning and you've executed beautifully. So how'd you do? What methods of evaluations are you using? What were the results at the end of the day? How did the results compare to the specific measurable objectives you had set in the very beginning? And how do the results reflect original strategy and planning? I was just curious, have you ever done a project that you won an award even though you didn't meet your goals?
That's a good question. Yes, we have. But it was not that every goal wasn't met. We would have one goal that was not met, but then we described through the planning and execution why that needed to shift. And that's actually, Aaron, really important to bring up. If you have to, midway through, you're going to know before the project's over if you're going to meet your goals or not. And if you're a quarter of the way through, midway through, because all of us as public relations practitioners are going to be constantly evaluating through the process to know where we are. And if we realize that something's not going to be met, one of the things that we bring to the table as strategists and counselors is that we work with the client or our boss or our company to make sure that we are setting appropriate goals. And sometimes that means changing course. And sometimes you don't realize until you get feedback on something that's going to work or not work. And I think it's very important that we be honest with ourselves on that. It's one of the challenges we have is that are we continuing to promote and then, it's a pass or fail. Communications is always a pass or fail. It's only a fail if we don't do anything else to remedy it. Because some things we realize aren't going to, that we think will gain traction don't. And so that's really where, yes, we have won it, but we've also, throughout the award entry, talked about how we had to recalculate objectives along the way.
Is there anything about the I guess the sandbag was sort of, it got built, so that was sort of, that's the ultimate, right?
Yeah, sandbag was, this was a groundbreaking. So the keys to it is, number one, do we get the funding? Number two, do we have the contractor on board? And number three, can we position it, as the highlighted project within the community to make the region understand that this will help bring a region back? And can it be the poster child for national projects, especially as we fight for funding in the future? So, our challenges had much more to do with timing and that type of thing. We weren't in a highly negative, we didn't have a lot of negative threats coming at us for this. But for a crisis communications plan, that's something that can always happen. I mean, later on we submitted an award last year that was about closing. We had to close the freeway down for 2 to 3 days. And how do you get past being called Carmageddon 2?
Right.
Which is what we were. And we had news crews there for 48 hours. So how do you manage that? And when you get into crisis communications, I'm actually a big fan for how we submit on those, because your initial objectives will constantly change, based on the severity of the crisis. Does the crisis change along the way? That type of thing. This was actually it was obviously very positive, very cut and dry, and we were able to focus just on those positives.
Very cool. Well, I thank you for breaking that up, because, just reading from slides, all the requirements is a little bit boring, and it's a great project. And Silver Anvil, I've never even applied for one yet.
We had not either. This was our first, and I'll tell you what, it was. If you have the opportunity to do it, and like I said, with the Silver Anvil, you kind of have to have the perfect storm of what works on the business side of your project and what you're doing on the communication side. But I'll tell you what, going to New York and being amongst the teams of Edelman's and the huge firms, and being from Southern California, and taking that a step further and making that the Inland Empire, it was incredible to the team we were networking with. They were actually even sometimes surprised to see us. And when we actually got called to win, I have to say it was by far and away one of the most thrilling moments of my career. And I don't know if I'll ever have a chance to do it again. I sure hope I do, but I would hope that if you ever put one in, and if you get the notification you're a finalist, invest everything you can to go to that ceremony, because
I
there's
bet.
nothing.
Yeah, that just it's the Tonys of the PR world, right? I don't.
Right.
Oh,
Some
it
people
is.
might not think Tonys are very big. The Emmys. Okay, there you go.
Oh, I went Oscars. I went big.
Okay,
Yeah.
there you go. Okay, the Oscars of the PR world. All right. Well, there is actually a huge database of awards if you're interested in looking at other national winning silver anvil entries. If you go to, I would just go to Google. The website at National isn't exactly always user-friendly, but if you go to Google and type in silver anvil PRSA, you'll find this page, and there's a case study search, and you can search by year, by category. So if you want to see how other people entered in similar categories that you plan on entering, it's just a huge resource. And you might get some really, really great ideas.
Well, and also, I believe Aaron, will we have the chance to put Carrie's case study on PRSA Inland Empire website
You know
for
what?
them
I
to
will.
look at the document?
I will do that.
Okay. So everyone listening in, we will have a link under the Polaris Awards section for you to read Westbound Communications entry for the I-215 groundbreaking. Well, very cool. Well, I know we're getting ready to wrap up, so just a couple of to summarize some of the upcoming deadlines and fees. As discussed, we have lowered the entry fees significantly, and as an incentive, since I am Miss Palm Springs, if you enter by August 8th, you will be entered to win an overnight trip to Palm Springs. So we will select someone, and it'll be a random drawing, and you'll be notified for, overnight desert getaway to beautiful Palm Springs. But as you can see, I recommend getting in early. It's $45 for members, $65 for non-members. Final deadline is Friday, August 22nd. Please mark on your calendar. We will be doing the awards ceremony at the Center Stage Fontana, which is a fantastic venue with a huge stage, theater. There'll be bar, there'll be entertainment, and that'll be for Wednesday, November 19th. And we'll go ahead to the next slide just to recap. So go to prsaie.org, download the entry form. It has all of the details we've discussed. Select a category and start working on your entry. Upload it to Dropbox by August 22nd. All these entries are judged by another sister PRSA chapter. And, put something together, go home with for an award, and go for the best in the West and for a silver anvil.
That's something I'm so glad I put that in the PowerPoint slide, because I wanted to let people know is that there is a Best of the West award. So the awards that make it to Best in Show regionally get passed on to Western District, which is Southern California, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado.
I think Oregon? I don't know.
No, there's one other one. New Mexico, perhaps? Hawaii. Hawaii. So the Best in Show gets this is only the second year that they're doing it, so it gets passed along. So hey, it'd be great to win locally, but also to move up to be Best in the West. So with that, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Carrie. Thank you for Westbound Communications sponsoring again this year. It's just awesome. Thank you for sharing your project and just your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Great.
And Hillary, just a huge fan. I called in a huge favor and asked her to take on our Polaris Awards this year, and she has not disappointed. And I'm just very grateful, because it's a lot of work putting everything together, from mailers to a brand new logo to finding a new award to selecting space. So, Hillary, you were awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Well, and thank you, Aaron, and everyone who's listening in. Please email us or call us directly, and let us know if you have any questions. And I look forward to seeing these entries coming in and recognizing you at the November 19th awards ceremony.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.